I did what I usually do with The Chosen. I watched it all in one day. And so I waited for them to all come out, and they all are finally out. And so on Friday, I started late in the afternoon, and I watched till 2:30 in the morning to finish the 8th one. And it made Saturday a little difficult, but it was worth it. Incredible message across the whole series. And I think it's God's timing that this is what I was already speaking on. And then there is a message from the first episode with the beheading and death of John the Baptist to the last episode, which is Jesus preparing to ride into Jerusalem. And what you really see throughout all 8 episodes is the heart of Judas begin to fall. Judas loved Jesus. Judas believed with everything he was, this is the Messiah. There was no doubt in his mind. He left everything he had, and he left his money. He left it all behind to follow Jesus. But what you see over the course of these 8 episodes is the same thing the Bible shows us, is that as time goes on in following Jesus, Jesus stops meeting Judas's expectations of what the Messiah should be. He's starting to realize this man isn't building an army. Judas, it tells us, was in charge of the money for the disciples. He is the one who always is saying, we don't have enough, we don't have enough. And so they have to beat out their own grain to make their own bread. They have to stay out in the field instead of at an inn. And Judas is like, he's got all these wonderful ideas that us modern church pastors have. And I love it in the show. He sits there and he's like, let's set up collection points. Jesus is doing such good. And here's his thought. His thought is this: I am kingdom-minded. Doesn't the Bible say, ask and you shall find, seek, knock, and if the door will be open? Ask, it will be given to you. Why? If what you are asking, seeking, and knocking for is kingdom-minded. And so this is what we do. We will lie to ourselves like Judas did. And Judas says, well, this is for the kingdom. This is the Messiah. If we run out of money before he can get enough people to follow him, he's going to be in trouble. So I need to help him out. After all, he brought me on because this is where my giftings lie. Do you hear me? This is how we all think. I can tell you I related to Judas so much. Jesus, this is my giftings, and I don't want you to run out of money, so let's do all these things. And the whole time, Jesus is going after Judas's heart. But as Judas begins to realize Jesus isn't here to amass an army or take a physical throne on earth, his heart begins to harden. He starts stealing money from the purse. John tells us that here in the verse I'm going to read. And they show that in the show. He just starts to take a little bit here and there. I'll invest it. Nobody else will listen to me, so I'll just invest it on behalf of the Lord. And his heart begins to harden. I want to read John 12 to you. This is one of the final scenes in episode 8 and speaks exactly to the story of the young ruler. This is how awesome God is, right? Like, I get to the end of it, I'm like, wow, God, did you just have me watch 8 hours of this to tie this in with what I'd been studying on the young ruler all week? John 12, verses 1 through 11. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume, poured it on Jesus' feet, and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As a keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. So here we see Judas pertains, right? Because remember, I am trying to build Jesus' kingdom the way I want it to be built. And that's really where his heart is at this point. How can you waste this money? And I love the contrast, and this is what the Lord showed me. It's cool when you can watch all 8 episodes together because you have the very first one to the last one still in your mind. Is after Lazarus is raised from the dead, it shows Mary and it shows her heart, and she asks Martha this question in the show. She says, what do you give a man who has everything? What do you give Jesus as a gift, a way to say thank you? And then the show shows her going and spending everything they had in their safe, 300 denarii, to buy this alabaster jar of perfume. and then to pour it out on his feet. And what she decides to give him isn't even the value and the expense of the jar. It's to show him his worth. That's the gift she gives. You are worth more than everything I have in my safe. You are worth more than my dignity. I will bow before you and pour this on your feet and then wipe it with my hair. I am going to give you my everything. What do you give a man who has everything? Your heart and your soul. Jesus sternly says, leave her alone. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. Meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well, for on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and believing in him. Jesus says in Matthew that what she has done will be told throughout the rest of history. And 2,000 years later in Santan Valley, Arizona, we're still talking about this act of love to Christ. In Matthew and Mark, it says the disciples sort of were upset. And it also talks about the Pharisees appalled that Jesus would let this woman touch him in such a way, that she is a wicked sinner. And the same thing remains true in all four versions in the gospel. Is here is a person who has given their whole life, who has laid down the finances they have, who has laid down the objections that they have had to who Jesus was. And they say, everything I have is yours. I will invest all that I have in you, Lord, no holding back. And that's really the message. And what I found is at the end, as I sat and prayed before the Lord, and I said, okay, Lord, search my heart, right? It's 2:30 in the morning. I'm out in my shop, finished watching this, and I just said, search my heart, Lord. And what I find is that I have tendencies, like maybe some of you, where I really related to Judas. Jesus, don't you see? Don't you see what we could do with? And I think a lot of that has to do with an upbringing of being in America. It has to do with being the pastor of a larger church in America.